Make one more mistake.
Emily's voice cracked through the kitchen like a whip, her fist raised high, the air around her trembling with rage. Anna, still in her apron, froze, her wide eyes caught between terror and disbelief, as if she'd been cornered by a predator with no escape. The marble counters gleamed coldly under the lights, their shine mocking the violence about to unfold. Behind them, Richard stood stunned, his face drained of color, as though the ground itself had shifted beneath his feet. The mansion's walls seemed to close in, holding a secret that no one was prepared to face, at least, not yet. Welcome to Story Theater. Take your seat, silence your phones and get ready to enjoy the story. The black sedan rolled through the tree-lined streets of Scarsdale, passing rows of colonial houses with their perfect lawns and white picket fences. Richard Collins sat in the back seat, his 70-year-old frame still upright, still commanding. His fingers drummed against his knee, a habit from decades of boardroom negotiations, but today the rhythm was irregular. Anxious, the driver turned onto a private road, gates opened without a sound. Beyond them stood the Bennett estate, 3 stories of red brick and white columns, windows that reflected the afternoon sun like cold eyes. Richard had seen photographs before, but the reality was different, grander, more imposing, the kind of house that whispered money in every corner. The car stopped at the circular driveway. Richard stepped out, straightening his navy blazer, his shoes crunched on the gravel. He looked up at the mansion, something about it made his chest tighten, not awe, something else, something he could not name. The front door opened before he reached it. Emily Bennett Collins appeared in the doorway, 38 years old, dressed in a cream cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. Her blonde hair was pulled back, in a smooth ponytail. She smiled, wide, practiced, perfect. "Mr. Collins," she said, walking down the steps, with her arms open, "we are so thrilled you could make it." Her voice was warm, like melted honey, but when Richard met her eyes, he felt a chill run through him. The smile did not reach those eyes, they were pale blue, sharp, watchful. She embraced him lightly, the kind of hug reserved for distant relatives, at funerals. Richard returned it with equal restraint. "Thank you for the invitation," he said. His voice came out steady, professional. "Years of practice." Emily stepped back, still smiling. "Charles is waiting inside, he has been looking forward to this all week." She led him through the front door into a grand foyer. The floor was polished marble, white with gray veins. Above them hung a crystal chandelier, each piece catching the light, and scattering it across the walls. A curved staircase rose to the second floor. Oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes mostly, European scenes, all expensive, all tasteful, all somehow lifeless. Richard followed Emily through the foyer, and into a sitting room. The furniture was cream and gold, antique sofas with carved wooden frames. A fireplace dominated one wall, unlit despite the autumn chill. Everything was immaculate, too immaculate, as if the room existed only to be looked at, never lived in. Charles Bennett stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, 72 years old, tall and thin, with white hair combed neatly to the side. He turned when they entered, his face broke into a smile. "Richard," he said, crossing the room with his hand extended, "good to see you, old friend." They shook hands. Charles's grip was firm but brief. "Good to see you too, Charles," Richard replied. "Sit, sit." Charles gestured to the sofa. "Emily, bring us some drinks, will you?" Emily nodded and left the room without a word. Her footsteps were silent on the thick carpet. Richard sat, the sofa was stiff beneath him. He glanced around the room again, his eyes moved over the furniture, the paintings, the carefully arranged flowers on the side table. Everything was in its place, everything was controlled. Charles settled into the armchair across from him. "How was the drive?" "Fine, traffic was light." "Good, good." Charles leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "I am glad we could finally arrange this. It has been too long since we sat down properly." Richard nodded. They had not seen each other in nearly a year, not since the wedding. David and Emily, his son and Charles's daughter, a union that had seemed natural at the time. Two families with similar backgrounds, similar wealth, but Richard had felt uneasy even then. He could not explain it. just a feeling, a tension beneath the surface. Emily returned with a tray, 2 glasses of scotch. She handed one to Richard, the other to her father. Her movements were graceful, deliberate. She smiled at Richard again before leaving the room. Richard took a sip. The scotch was smooth. Expensive? So, Charles said, swirling his glass. How is business? They talked. Stocks, real estate, the usual subjects. Richard answered on autopilot. His mind was elsewhere. He kept noticing things, the way the light fell on the far wall, creating shadows that looked like cracks, the faint smell of bleach beneath the floral air freshener, the silence, too much silence. A house this size should have sounds, footsteps, voices, something. A door opened somewhere in the distance. Richard heard muffled voices, a woman's voice, sharp and angry, then nothing. He paused mid-sentence. Charles did not seem to notice. He continued talking about interest rates. Richard set his glass down. "Excuse me," he said, "the restroom?" Charles gestured toward the hallway. Down the hall, second door on the left. Richard stood and walked out of the sitting room. The hallway stretched before him, doors on either side, all closed. The walls were painted a soft gray. More paintings hung at intervals. He walked slowly, his footsteps muted by the thick runner carpet. He passed the second door, did not stop. Something pulled him forward. The voices, he heard them again, clearer now, coming from the back of the house. He followed the sound. The hallway turned. At the end was a swinging door. Kitchen, probably. He approached quietly. The voices grew louder. Emily's voice cut through the air. "You stupid, useless woman." Richard stopped just before the door. Through the narrow gap, he could see into the kitchen. Stainless steel appliances, white tile, a large island in the center, and Emily, standing with her arms crossed. Her face was twisted, all the warmth gone, replaced by something cold, cruel. In front of her stood a woman, older, maybe in her early 40s, dark hair streaked with gray, tied back in a simple bun. She wore plain clothes, a gray sweater, black pants. Her head was down, her shoulders hunched. "I told you 3 times, Emily hissed. 3 times, and you still got it wrong." The woman said nothing, just stood there, trembling slightly. Emily stepped closer. "Look at me when I am talking to you." The woman lifted her head, slowly, reluctantly. Richard's breath caught in his throat. The face, he knew that face, or did he? His mind spun, the shape of the eyes, the line of the jaw, the way her mouth turned down at the corners. It was familiar, achingly familiar. Sarah, no, it could not be. Sarah had been gone for 36 years, taken in 1989, 8 years old, vanished from a park in New Jersey. They searched for months, years, nothing, no body, no trace. His wife had left him 5 years later, broken by grief. Richard had buried himself in work, tried to forget, tried to move on, but he never really did. And now this woman, this frightened, trembling woman in Charles Bennett's kitchen. She looked like Sarah, not the child he remembered, but the woman she might have become. Emily grabbed the woman's arm. "You will redo the entire dinner. Do you understand?" The woman nodded. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, ma'am." Emily released her with a shove. The woman stumbled back against the counter. Richard felt his hands clench into fists. His heart pounded against his ribs. He wanted to burst through the door, wanted to demand answers, wanted to pull that woman away from Emily's cruelty, but he did not move. Years of discipline held him in place, years of calculated decisions. He forced himself to breathe, to think. If he confronted them now, what would happen? They would deny it, hide her, make her disappear again. If it was even Sarah, if he was not just an old man seeing ghosts, he needed proof, he needed time. Slowly, silently, Richard backed away from the door. His legs felt unsteady. He found the restroom, went inside, locked the door, stood at the sink, gripping the edges, staring at his reflection. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He looked like a man who had seen something impossible. Maybe he had. He turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on his face. It did nothing to clear the fog in his mind. Sarah, could it really be Sarah? He dried his hands, straightened his tie, composed his expression. Then he walked back to the sitting room. Charles looked up as he entered. "Ah, there you are. I was just telling Emily we should move to the dining room. Dinner is almost ready." Richard nodded, managed a smile. "Sounds good." They moved through the house, to a formal dining room, long table, high-backed chairs, more paintings, a chandelier that dripped with crystal. Richard sat, his mind was still back in that kitchen, seeing that face, hearing Emily's venom. Emily appeared again, the perfect hostess, smiling, polite. "Dinner will be out shortly," she said. Richard watched her, this woman married to his son, this woman who spoke with such warmth in public, and such cruelty in private, and somewhere in this house, hidden like a secret, was a woman who might be his daughter. Richard picked up his wine glass, his hand did not shake, he had learned long ago how to hide what he felt, but inside, a storm was building, a storm of hope and fear and rage, and it had only just begun. The dining room felt like a stage. Richard sat at the long table, silverware gleaming under the chandelier light. Charles was to his right, Emily across from him. They made small talk, weather, politics, the kind of conversation that filled space, without saying anything real. Richard nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, but his mind was not there. It was still in that kitchen, seeing that woman's face, the fear in her eyes, the way she had flinched when Emily grabbed her arm. A server brought out the first course, soup, something creamy with herbs floating on top. Richard picked up his spoon. The motion was automatic. "This is delicious," Charles said. "Emily, you must give my compliments to Anna." Anna? The name hit Richard like a punch to the chest. He set his spoon down carefully, too carefully. "Anna?" he asked. His voice sounded normal, casual. "Is that your cook?" Emily looked up, her smile was thin. "Our housekeeper, she handles everything, she must be very talented." "She is adequate," Emily said. The word came out clipped, cold, then she caught herself, softened her expression. "We are fortunate to have her." Richard nodded slowly, he wanted to ask more. Where did she come from? How long had she worked here? Did she ever leave the house? But he could not without raising suspicion. He lifted his spoon again. The soup tasted like nothing. The meal dragged on, course after course, salad, fish, lamb, each dish was perfect, plated like art, but Richard barely tasted any of it. His stomach was a knot, his chest tight. He kept glancing toward the kitchen door. It stayed closed. No sign of Anna, no sounds from beyond it. Where was she now? Still in the kitchen, or had Emily sent her somewhere else, somewhere out of sight? "Richard?" Charles was watching him. "I asked how David is doing." Richard cleared his throat. "He is doing well, very busy with cases. Federal work is demanding." "It is?" Emily leaned forward slightly. "We rarely see him these days." There was something in her tone, not quite complaint, not quite concern, something sharper. Richard studied her face. She looked back at him without flinching. "He takes his work seriously," Richard said. "Of course." Emily's smile returned, perfect and empty. They finished dinner. Dessert was served, chocolate something, rich and dark. Richard forced down a few bites. Finally, Charles pushed back from the table. "Shall we have coffee in the library?" "Actually," Richard said, "I should probably head back. Early meeting tomorrow." It was a lie. He had no meeting, but he could not stay here another minute. Not with that woman somewhere in this house. Not with Emily's false smile, not with the weight of what he had seen pressing down on him. Charles looked disappointed but nodded. Of course, business waits for no one. They stood, moved toward the front hall. Emily walked with them, her heels clicking on the marble floor. As they reached the door, Richard heard something, a sound from deeper in the house, faint but distinct, a crash, like something falling, or being thrown. He stopped. Emily's expression did not change, but her jaw tightened, just for a second, then it was gone. "What was that?" Richard asked. "Probably just the cat," Emily said smoothly. "She knocks things over constantly." Richard had not seen a cat, had not heard any mention of one, but he nodded. Charles opened the front door, cool air rushed in, it felt like freedom. "Thank you for coming," Charles said, shaking Richard's hand. "Yes, We should do this more often. Emily stepped forward, kissed Richard on the cheek, European style. Her perfume was strong, floral with something sharp underneath. Drive safely, she said. Richard walked to his car. The driver was waiting. He climbed in, did not look back at the house, could not. As the car pulled away, he finally let himself breathe, really breathe. His hands were shaking, he pressed them against his knees. That woman, Anna, the shape of her face, the way she moved, even through the fear, even through the years, he had seen something, a ghost of the child he had lost, but it could not be, could it? Sarah had been 8 when she disappeared, taken from a playground in New Jersey on a summer afternoon. One moment she was on the swings, the next she was gone. Witnesses said they saw a woman lead her away, a woman who looked kind, trustworthy. Sarah had gone willingly. The police searched for months. FBI got involved. They found nothing, no body, no evidence, no leads that went anywhere. His wife Claire had fallen apart. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, blamed Richard for not being there that day, blamed herself for looking away for just a minute. The guilt ate her alive. 5 years later, she left, moved to California. They divorced quietly. He had not spoken to her in decades. Richard had thrown himself into work, built his company bigger, made more money. None of it filled the hole, none of it brought Sarah back. And now this, Anna, a woman with Sarah's eyes. The car turned onto the highway. Richard pulled out his phone, stared at it, then he made a call. James? It is Richard. I need you to do something for me, quietly. James Miller had been his personal assistant for 20 years, discreet, loyal. He asked few questions. Of course, sir, what do you need? I need you to look into someone, a woman named Anna. She works as a housekeeper at the Bennett estate in Scarsdale. I want to know everything about her, where she came from, how long she has been there, anything you can find. There was a pause. Is everything all right? I do not know yet. Just find out what you can. Do not let anyone know you are asking. Understood. I will start tonight. Richard hung up, leaned his head back against the seat, closed his eyes. His mind would not stop. It raced through memories. Sarah as a baby, Sarah learning to walk, Sarah laughing at cartoons, Sarah on that last day, running toward the playground, her brown hair flying behind her. He had replayed that day 1,000 times, 10,000 times, wondering what he could have done differently, wondering if she was still alive somewhere, wondering if she remembered him. The car pulled up to his building, a high-rise in Manhattan, doorman, security, all the comforts money could buy, all meaningless. He rode the elevator to the penthouse, walked through rooms too big for one person, poured himself a scotch, did not drink it, just held the glass. His phone buzzed, a text from David asking how dinner went. Richard stared at the message. How could he answer that? What could he say? He typed back a simple reply, and set the phone down. He walked to his study, opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a box, old, worn at the corners. He had not opened it in years. He lifted the lid. Photographs, dozens of them. Sarah at every age, from newborn to 8 years old, her whole life captured in these images. Richard picked up one. Sarah at 6, missing her front teeth, grinning at the camera. His chest ached. He pulled out another. Sarah at 8, the last photo taken before she disappeared. She wore a yellow dress, her hair in 2 braids. She looked happy. Richard held the photo up to the light, studied every detail of her face, the shape of her eyes, wide set, brown, the curve of her cheeks, the small mole just above her left eyebrow. The woman at the Bennett house, Anna, she had those eyes, that mole. Or was he just seeing what he wanted to see? Was grief making him imagine connections that were not there? He did not know, could not know, not yet, but he had to find out. Richard put the photographs back, closed the box, locked the drawer. He walked to the window, looked out at the city. Lights stretched to the horizon, millions of people, millions of lives, and somewhere out there, maybe, his daughter was alive. The thought terrified him, because hope was more painful than grief. Grief was final, hope meant the wound could be ripped open again, but he could not walk away, not now. not after seeing that woman's face. He would find the truth, whatever it was, whatever it cost. Richard stood at the window until dawn, watching the sky change from black to gray to pale blue, not sleeping, not thinking clearly, just waiting for answers that might destroy him. 3 days passed like years. Richard went through the motions of his life, meetings, phone calls, signing documents, but nothing felt real. His mind was always somewhere else, in that kitchen, in that moment when Anna lifted her head, and he saw her face. He slept poorly. When he did sleep, he dreamed of Sarah, Sarah as a child, Sarah calling for him, Sarah just out of reach. On the morning of the 4th day, James Miller arrived at Richard's penthouse. He carried a thin folder. His expression was careful, neutral. Richard led him to the study, closed the door. His heart was pounding so hard he thought James might hear it. "What did you find?" Richard asked. His voice came out rough. James opened the folder, laid papers on the desk. "Not much, that is the problem." Richard leaned forward. The papers were sparse, a few notes, no official records. "Anna has no social security trail," James said, "no tax records, no employment history, before the Bennett household." Richard's chest tightened. "How is that possible?" "It is not legally." James pulled out another sheet. "I spoke to people in the neighborhood, very carefully. No one knows much about her. They see her occasionally at the market, always with Emily Bennett or someone from the household, never alone." "Never alone," Richard repeated. "She does not drive, has no car registered in her name, no bank accounts I could find." James paused. "It is as if she does not exist outside that house." Richard sat back, his hands were shaking, he pressed them flat against the desk. "There is more," James said quietly. "The Bennett estate has extensive security, cameras, high fences, electronic gates, more than most homes of that size, to keep people out," Richard said, "or to keep someone in." The words hung in the air. Richard felt something break open inside his chest. Hope, terrible, painful hope. "You think she is being held there?" James chose his words carefully. "I think something is not right. Whether it involves this woman specifically, I cannot say, but the circumstances are unusual." Richard stood, walked to the window. The city spread below him, so many lives, so much movement, and somewhere in Scarsdale, Anna was trapped. If she was Sarah, if, "I need more," Richard said. "I need to know for certain, Mr. Collins. If you suspect a crime, we should contact the authorities." "No, not yet. If I am wrong, I ruin my son's marriage over nothing. If I am right and they find out I am investigating, they could move her, hide her somewhere else." James nodded slowly. "Then what do you want me to do?" Richard thought. His mind worked through possibilities, risks. He had not built a billion-dollar company by being reckless, but this was not business, this was his daughter. "Maybe, watch the house," Richard said. "Note who comes and goes, when Anna appears, where she goes, get photographs if you can, but stay invisible." "I can do that." "And James, if anyone asks what you are doing, you know nothing. This is on me, only me." James stood, gathered his papers. "I will start today." After James left, Richard stood in his study for a long time. The folder lay on his desk. He picked it up, looked through the papers again. So little information, so many gaps, no employment history, no social security, no life outside that house. It was not proof, but it was enough to feed the hope growing inside him, enough to make him believe this might be real. He pulled out his phone, stared at it, then he made a call. "David? It is Dad. Do you have time for lunch today?" His son sounded surprised, but agreed to meet at 1:30. Richard arrived at the restaurant early, sat at a corner table, ordered water, did not drink it. David arrived right on time, 37 years old, tall like Richard, same build, but where Richard's hair had gone gray, David's was still dark. He wore a suit, federal prosecutor, serious, focused. They embraced briefly, sat down. "You look tired," David said. "I am fine, how are you?" "Busy. We are in the middle of a fraud case, major investment firm, it is consuming everything." They ordered, made small talk. Richard barely heard himself speaking. His mind was working through how to approach this, what to ask without revealing too much. "How is Emily?" Richard finally asked. David smiled. "She is good, working on some charity event." Richard nodded, thought of Emily's face in that kitchen, the cruelty in her eyes, the venom in her voice. "You two seem happy," Richard said. "We are. I know you had reservations about us getting married so quickly, but it was the right decision." Richard had objected, not loudly, but he had felt uneasy from the start. Something about Emily did not sit right with him. He had chalked it up to protective instinct. Now he wondered if it had been something more. "Tell me about her family," Richard said. "The Bennets. I realized at dinner the other night that I hardly know them." David shrugged. "Old money, very traditional. Charles made his fortune in real estate decades ago. Emily's mother passed away when Emily was young, and Emily grew up in that house?" "Yes." "Why all the questions?" Richard hesitated. "Just curious. It is an impressive estate, very secure. Charles values his privacy. I notice they have a housekeeper, Anna." Something flickered across David's face, brief, almost too quick to catch, but Richard saw it. "What about her?" David asked. "Just seemed like an unusual setup, very isolated." David set down his fork. "Dad, what is this about?" Richard met his son's eyes. "I saw Emily talking to Anna, in the kitchen. It was not pleasant. Emily can be demanding, she has high standards. It was more than that, she was cruel." David's expression hardened. "You're judging my wife based on one overheard conversation. I am concerned." "About what exactly?" Richard wanted to say everything, wanted to tell David about Sarah, about the resemblance, about the investigation, but looking at his son's defensive posture, the tightness around his mouth, Richard knew he could not. "Not yet." "Nothing," Richard said. "Forget I mentioned it." But David did not let it go. "Emily comes from a different world than we do. They have rules, expectations. Sometimes that can seem harsh to outsiders." "Harsh?" Richard repeated. The word felt inadequate. They finished lunch in strained silence. When they parted on the street, David's goodbye was cool. Richard watched him walk away. He had handled that badly, pushed too hard. Now David would tell Emily about their conversation. Emily would be on guard. Richard cursed himself. Decades of careful negotiation, and he had fumbled this like an amateur. His phone rang. "James, I am at the house. Something is happening. A delivery truck just arrived. Medical supplies." Richard's pulse quickened. "What kind of supplies?" "I could not see clearly, but the boxes had pharmaceutical labels, a lot of them." "Stay there, keep watching." Richard stood on the sidewalk. People flowed around him, traffic hummed past, the world moved at its normal pace, while his spun faster and faster. Medical supplies. Why would a private home need so many medical supplies? Unless someone there was sick, or injured, or being kept sedated. Richard felt his anger rise, sharp and hot. If they were drugging her, if they were keeping her prisoner with medication, he forced himself to breathe, to think clearly. He could not storm in there, could not confront them without proof, but every day he waited was another day Sarah stayed trapped. If it was Sarah, he walked back to his building, rode the elevator up, went to his study, pulled out the old photographs again, spread them across his desk. Sarah at 2, at 4, at 6, at 8. He tried to imagine her face aging, adding years, lines, gray in the dark hair. What would 33 years do to a person? Especially 33 years in captivity. His phone buzzed. A text from James, a photograph. Richard opened it, his breath caught. It was Anna, walking to a car with Emily beside her. The photo was taken from a distance but the angle was clear, Anna's face in profile. Richard zoomed in, studied every detail, the slope of her nose, the curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell across her forehead. He picked up the photo of Sarah at 8, held it next to his phone screen. The resemblance was undeniable, but resemblance was not proof. People could look alike, the mind could see patterns that were not really there. Richard needed certainty, needed something concrete. DNA, the thought hit him clearly. If he could get a sample from Anna, hair, saliva, anything, he could have it tested against his own DNA. Know for certain, But how? He could not just walk up to her, could not ask her for a sample without raising every alarm. He would have to get close, get into that house again somehow. Richard sat in his study, as afternoon turned to evening, planning, calculating, preparing for what he might have to do, because if Anna was Sarah, if his daughter had been alive, all these years just miles away, he would get her out, whatever it took. The conference room was all glass and steel, 20 stories above Manhattan. Richard sat at the head of the table. Around him sat 8 people, his executives, lawyers, the team from Bauer Industries. $40 million, that was the contract on the table, a manufacturing partnership, that would expand Collins Enterprises into 3 new European markets. Richard had spent 18 months negotiating this deal. It should have been the pinnacle of his career, but he could not focus. Dieter Hoffmann was speaking, head of Bauer Industries, gray beard, wire-rimmed glasses. The terms in Section 12 require clarification, Dieter said. Richard stared at the contract, the words blurred. He nodded, hoped it looked like he was paying attention. His phone sat on the table, face down, silent, but he kept glancing at it. James was watching the Bennett house today. Mr. Collins? Richard looked up. Everyone was watching him. Dieter had asked a question. Richard had not heard it. I apologize, Richard said. Could you repeat that? Dieter frowned. The liability caps. Are you comfortable with the proposed limits? Richard looked at his lead counsel, Margaret Chin, 50 years old, sharp as a blade. Margaret, what is your assessment? Margaret's expression showed surprise. He never deflected like this, but she recovered quickly. The caps are within acceptable parameters, though we might push for a 5% increase, given the projected volumes. Dieter nodded. Agreed? Yes, agreed. The meeting continued. Richard forced himself to engage, but his mind kept drifting, back to Scarsdale, back to that house, back to Anna. His phone buzzed. Everyone pretended not to notice. You did not check your phone during a $40 million negotiation. Richard did not care. He picked up the phone, a text from James, just 2 words, she's out. Richard's heart jumped. He stood, the chair scraped against the floor. I apologize, Richard said. I need to step out. Margaret can continue. Margaret's eyes widened. Dieter looked confused. Mr. Collins, Dieter said carefully, we are at a critical juncture. Margaret has full authority to finalize terms. He walked out, heard the murmur of confused voices behind him. In the hallway, he called James. Where is she? Scarsdale Farmers Market, North End. She is with Emily. Richard was already moving toward the elevator. I will be there in 30 minutes, sir. Emily appears very attentive. She has not left Anna's side. I understand. Stay there. Richard hung up, pressed the elevator button. The wait felt eternal. The doors opened. He stepped in. As the elevator descended, he caught his reflection. He looked wild, eyes too bright, hair disheveled, tie crooked. He did not care. The elevator reached the garage. Richard ran to his car, got behind the wheel, something he rarely did anymore, started the engine, pulled out into Manhattan traffic. The drive was torture. Every red light, every slow taxi. Richard gripped the steering wheel, until his knuckles went white, honked when someone took too long to move, cut off a delivery truck. His phone rang. Margaret? He ignored it, rang again, ignored it again. A text appeared. Bauer team is confused. What should I tell them? Richard typed back one-handed. Tell them I had an emergency. Finalize the deal. Another text. Is everything all right? He did not respond. Traffic thinned as he left the city. He pressed harder on the accelerator. Scarsdale was 25 minutes from Manhattan in good traffic. Richard made it in 18. He pulled into the farmer's market parking lot, saw James near a coffee cart. Richard parked badly, crooked across 2 spaces, got out, walked quickly but forced himself not to run. James gave a slight nod toward the north end. Richard followed the gesture, and there she was. Anna stood in front of a vegetable stand. She wore a plain gray coat, her hair was pulled back, she held a canvas shopping bag. Next to her was Emily, perfect posture, designer jacket. Richard moved closer, stayed behind a row of flower stands. His heart was beating so hard, he could feel it in his throat. Anna picked up an apple, examined it, set it down. Her movements were careful, hesitant, like someone who had been punished for making wrong choices. Emily said something. Anna nodded, picked up a different apple. Emily took it from her, inspected it, shook her head. Anna's shoulders dropped. He wanted to walk over there, wanted to grab Anna and run, wanted to confront Emily right there, but he could not without proof. Instead, he pulled out his phone, started taking photos, Anna's face from different angles. Emily was looking at her phone, for just a moment, distracted. Richard moved, closed the distance, got within 10 feet of them, close enough to hear. "We need spinach," Emily said. "Get the organic, and make sure it is fresh. If it is wilted, I will know." "Yes, ma'am," Anna said quietly. The voice, Richard's breath caught. It had been 33 years since he heard Sarah's voice. She had been 8, a child's voice. This voice was different, older, worn, but something in it, some quality, some ghost of familiarity, or was he imagining it? Anna turned toward the spinach. For a moment, she faced Richard directly, 20 feet away. Her eyes met his. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, they looked at each other. Richard saw confusion in her face, a flicker of something, recognition? Fear? Then Emily looked up. "Anna, spinach, now." Anna's eyes dropped, she moved to the vegetables. The moment was over, but Emily had seen. Emily was looking at Richard now, her expression shifted, surprise, then calculation. She walked toward him, smile in place, eyes hard. "Mr. Collins, what a coincidence." Richard forced himself to return the smile. "Emily, yes, I had some free time, thought I would pick up some fresh produce." Her eyes scanned him, took in the suit, the tie, the expensive watch. "You drove all the way from Manhattan to shop, at a farmer's market?" "I find it relaxing." "How interesting." She paused. "David mentioned you had questions about our household." "About Anna." Richard kept his expression neutral, just making conversation, nothing important. It seemed important to David. "I apologize if I caused any concern." Emily tilted her head, studied him. Richard had negotiated with tough opponents, his entire career, but something about Emily's gaze made his skin crawl. "Anna has been with our family for a very long time," Emily said. Her voice was light, conversational, but there was steel underneath. "She is quite happy, very loyal." "That is good to hear." "She would be very upset if anything disrupted her life. She does not handle change well, becomes quite distressed." Richard understood the message, the threat. If he tried to interfere, Anna would suffer for it. "I am sure she is well cared for," Richard said. "Very well cared for." Emily smiled wider. "Now if you will excuse us." She turned, walked back to Anna, said something quiet. Anna immediately stopped what she was doing. They moved toward the exit. He watched them go. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, but he stood frozen. Emily knew he was suspicious. She would be more careful now, more protective. The house would be harder to access. He had made a mistake coming here, had acted on impulse instead of strategy. But as Anna walked away, she glanced back, just once, just for a second, and in that glance, Richard saw something that changed everything. She was not just scared, she was hoping. There was something in her eyes that had not been there before, some tiny spark, some recognition. Richard stood in the farmer's market, until they drove away, until James came over. "We need to move faster," Richard said. "Sir, she knows I am suspicious. She will lock everything down tighter. We need proof. We need it now. What do you want me to do?" Richard thought. His mind was clearer now. The wild desperation was settling into cold determination. "Find out everything you can about that house. Blueprints, security systems, schedules, everything. You are planning to go in." "Yes, that is breaking and entering. If you are caught, it will not matter who your lawyers are." "I know." James nodded slowly. "When?" "Soon, very soon." They walked back to their cars. Richard got in, sat behind the wheel, did not start the engine right away. His phone showed 17 missed calls, text from Margaret, from Dieter, from his entire team. The Bauer deal, He had walked out on the most important negotiation of his career. He looked at the messages, read Margaret's careful questions, the growing concern, then he put the phone down. Some things were more important than contracts, some things were worth everything. For 3 days, Richard watched the Bennett estate. He sat in his car 2 blocks away, hour after hour, learning the patterns, the rhythms. James had gathered blueprints, construction permits, security registrations. The information painted a picture, a fortress disguised as a home. Richard learned the schedules: garbage on Wednesdays, landscapers on Thursdays, Emily left at 11 most days, shopping, lunch, charity meetings. Charles was harder to track. Sometimes his car left early, sometimes it stayed all day. On Tuesday morning, both left, Charles at 8:30, Emily at 10:45. Richard waited, counted to 1,000, then moved. He had dressed carefully, dark clothes, thin gloves, anonymous, forgettable. He walked to the property without hesitation. Hesitation drew attention. The main gate had cameras, but on the east side, where old trees grew close, the cameras had blind spots. Richard had studied them for hours. He found the spot, an old oak near the fence. He climbed. His 70-year-old body protested. Muscles that spent decades behind desks were not made for this, but fear and desperation made him strong. He pulled himself onto a thick branch, edged along it carefully. The fence was 8 feet high with decorative iron spikes at the top, but the branch extended past it. Richard lowered himself, hung for a moment, then dropped. He landed hard, pain shot through his knees. He bit down on a gasp, stayed low, listened. Nothing, no alarms, no dogs barking, just the sound of rain on leaves. He was in. Richard moved toward the house, stayed close to the shrubs that lined the property. The mansion loomed before him, red brick, white trim, windows that stared like dead eyes. He reached the back door, tried the handle, locked. He pulled out a small tool, something James had given him without asking questions: tension wrench and pick. Richard had practiced on his own locks for 2 days. His hands shook, the tools slipped. He steadied himself, tried again, felt for the pins inside the lock. The first one clicked, then the second, the third took longer. His fingers were slick with sweat despite the cold rain. Finally, the fourth pin, the lock turned. Richard opened the door, stepped inside, closed it quietly behind him. He was in a mudroom, coats hung on hooks, boots lined up beneath them, everything neat, everything controlled. He moved forward into a hallway, hardwood floors, Persian rugs, oil paintings on the walls. The silence was oppressive. The house felt empty, but Richard knew better. Anna was here, somewhere, hidden away like a shameful secret. He found the basement door in the kitchen, a plain white door between the pantry and the refrigerator, easy to overlook, easy to forget about. Richard opened it. Stairs descended into darkness. He felt for a light switch, found one, clicked it. Yellow light illuminated concrete steps. He went down, one step at a time. Each creak of wood made his heart jump. The basement was finished, painted walls, drop ceiling. It looked like a recreation room, pool table, bar area, television, all dusty, all unused. But there was another door, at the far end, metal, with a deadbolt. Richard crossed to it, put his hand on the cold steel. This was it, he could feel it. He tried the door, locked, but this lock was different, heavier. He pulled out the tools again, worked the pins. It took longer this time. His hands were shaking worse now. Sweat dripped into his eyes. The lock clicked, the door opened. Beyond was a hallway, narrow, dim, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, concrete floor. This was not finished, this was hidden. Richard stepped inside. The air smelled different here, stale, closed off, like no fresh air had reached this place in years. There were 2 more doors, one on the left, one at the end of the hall, both wooden, both with locks on the outside, sliding bolts, simple, brutal. Richard went to the first door, slid the bolt, opened it. A bedroom, small, a single bed with a thin mattress, a dresser, a lamp. No windows. The walls were painted pale yellow, but the paint was old, peeling in places. Empty. Richard backed out, moved to the second door. the one at the end of the hall. His hands were shaking so badly now, he could barely grip the bolt. He slid it open, pushed the door, and there she was. Anna sat on the edge of a bed, the same kind of bed as the other room, the same bare walls. She wore a simple gray dress, her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked up when the door opened, her eyes went wide, terrified. "Please, I did not do anything wrong, I promise." Richard's heart shattered. She thought he was there to punish her, she thought he was one of them. "Anna, I am not here to hurt you, I am here to help." She stared at him, confusion replaced fear. "Who are you?" "My name is Richard Collins." "Do you remember your name, your real name?" She shook her head slowly. "My name is Anna. Before that, when you were a little girl, do you remember?" Something flickered in her eyes, pain, deep and old. "I am not supposed to remember," she said. Remembering was bad. "Who said that?" "Mrs. Bennet, Emily's mother. She said I had to forget, had to be good. If I was good, I would not be punished." Richard felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. They had taken a child, broken her, made her forget who she was. "You had a different name once, a name your parents gave you. Do you remember? Please, try to remember." Anna closed her eyes, her face twisted with effort, with pain. "They said my old life was gone, that no one wanted me, that I belonged to them now. That was a lie. Someone did want you, someone never stopped looking." She opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her face changed, some long buried recognition stirring. "Your face, I have seen your face before. Yes, a long time ago. You were 8 years old, you were at a playground in New Jersey. Do you remember?" "The playground," she said slowly, the words coming from somewhere deep. "There was a woman, she said she knew my parents, she seemed nice, she took me to a car, another woman gave me something to drink. When I woke up, I was in this room, I have been in this room ever since, 33 years. Richard could not speak, could not breathe. The truth was somehow worse than he had imagined. "They told me my parents did not want me, that I was bad. Your parents did want you. Your mother searched until it broke her. Your father never stopped looking, never stopped hoping." "My father," Anna repeated. She looked at Richard, and suddenly she understood. "You?" "Yes, me, Sarah, my Sarah." She stood, slowly, uncertain, like someone learning to walk after years of being still. She moved toward him, 1 step, 2 steps, stopped an arm's length away. "I am not supposed to leave this room. If I leave without permission, they hurt me. They will never hurt you again, I promise." Richard reached out, took her hand. It was cold, small, fragile. "This time you are coming home." Richard led her toward the door. She came with him, but her steps were hesitant, frightened. She kept looking back, as if the room was safety, as if freedom was the danger. They reached the stairs, started up. Richard went first, Sarah followed. They made it to the kitchen, to the mudroom, almost to the door. Then they heard it, a car in the driveway, doors slamming, voices. The front door opened, Emily's voice carried through the house. Richard pulled Sarah back toward the basement door, but it was too late. Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, saw them, her face went white, then red. "What are you doing in my house? How dare you? I am taking my daughter home." "Your daughter? That is ridiculous. Anna is our employee, she is here by choice." "Then ask her if she chooses to stay." Emily looked at Sarah, and the mask slipped. For just a moment, Richard saw the truth in her eyes, the knowledge, the guilt, the fear. "Anna, tell him you want to stay." Sarah looked at Emily, then at Richard, then at the door, the way out, the escape she had dreamed of for decades. "No, I do not want to stay, I want to leave." And everything changed. Richard kept Sarah behind him, his body between her and Emily, protective, instinctive, the way a father stands between his child and danger. Emily's face was a mask of fury, but beneath it, Richard saw something else: fear, calculation. She was weighing her options, deciding how to handle this catastrophe. She pulled out her phone, her finger hovered over the screen. Richard's heart jumped, but he did not move, did not back down. You broke into my house, Emily said. Her voice was ice. I am calling the police. Richard met her eyes. Steady. Certain? Call them. Tell them about the locked rooms in your basement. Tell them how you kept a kidnapped woman prisoner, for 33 years. Emily's finger froze. She did not dial. The silence stretched between them, taut, dangerous, heavy with unspoken threats. Behind Richard, Sarah was trembling. He could feel it, the shaking of her hand in his, decades of fear and conditioning warring against the fragile hope of escape. She had been taught to obey, to submit, to accept punishment without question. Breaking that pattern was like breaking chains forged over 33 years. You have no proof, Emily finally said. She lowered the phone slightly, her mind working. Anna has mental health issues. She tells fantasies. The lie was smooth, well practiced. Richard wondered how many times Emily had rehearsed this story in her head, how many contingency plans she had made for the day someone discovered the truth. Then explain the locks on her door, explain why she has no identification. Emily's jaw tightened, her eyes flickered with something dark, desperate. She is mentally unwell, the locks are for her safety, we have been caring for her. Richard felt rage building in his chest, hot and sharp, the audacity of the lie, the casual cruelty of it. Sarah, tell her you want to leave. Sarah's voice came out, barely audible, shaking. I already did. Louder, Richard said gently. Say it louder. Sarah took a breath. He felt her hand tighten in his, felt her gathering courage from somewhere deep inside, from some place they had not been able to break. I want to leave. I do not want to stay here anymore. Emily's expression cracked, just for a moment. The mask slipped, rage flashed across her face, raw and ugly and hateful. After everything we have done for you, Emily hissed. You kept me prisoner, Sarah said, and now her voice was not shaking. Now it was clear. You took me from my family, you hurt me. Emily stepped forward. Richard moved to block her. They stood facing each other, two people on opposite sides of a terrible truth that could no longer be hidden. Get out of my way. No, she is my employee, she is my daughter. Richard saw Emily's mind racing, calculating, looking for leverage, for escape, for any way to turn the situation to her advantage. You cannot prove that. DNA test, 2 days. When it proves Anna is Sarah Collins, you will go to prison. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her expression shifted, became more guarded, more calculating. That is David, she said. What should I tell him? Tell him whatever you want. We are leaving. Richard started to move toward the door. Sarah moved with him, small steps, hesitant. She kept her eyes on Emily, watching, waiting for the punishment that always came when she disobeyed. But Emily did not move. She just stood there, phone in hand, face hard as stone, planning her next move. They reached the mudroom. Richard grabbed a coat from the hook, wrapped it around Sarah's shoulders. She was shaking again, from cold or fear or shock, he could not tell, probably all three. He opened the back door. Rain was falling harder now, the sky was gray and heavy, the world outside looked alien, foreign, dangerous. After so many years locked in a basement room, even rain felt like a threat. Sarah stopped at the threshold. Her feet would not move forward. She stared at the rain, at the trees, at the open space beyond the door, all of it overwhelming. I cannot, she whispered, not without her watching, not without permission. What if they find me? Richard turned to face her, put his hands on her shoulders, looked into her eyes, those eyes that were so much like the child he remembered, the daughter he had lost. I am here, I will not let anything happen to you. Sarah's face was twisted with doubt, with fear, with the weight of decades of psychological manipulation. What if she is right? What if I am crazy? You are not crazy, you were stolen, you were hurt, but you survived, and now you are going home. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, her whole body shaking. I do not remember what home feels like. Then we will learn together. Richard took her hand again, led her through the door, into the rain, into freedom that felt more terrifying than captivity. Sarah gasped when the rain hit her face, cold and clean and real. She lifted her face to the sky, let the water wash over her, let it soak her hair, her skin. 33 years of captivity could not be washed away so easily, but it was a start, a beginning. They moved across the lawn, toward the fence, toward the tree where Richard had climbed, over just an hour ago. It felt like a lifetime now. Behind them, the back door slammed shut. Richard looked back, saw Emily watching from a window, phone pressed to her ear, talking to someone, making her own plans, building her own defenses. They reached the fence. Richard looked up at the tree. The branch seemed higher now, more difficult, impossible with Sarah. I cannot climb that, Sarah said, defeat in her voice. We will find another way. Richard led her along the fence line, looking for a gate, a weakness, any way through. His mind was racing. They needed to move faster. Emily would not just let them walk away, she would call someone, do something. They had minutes at most. There, near the front of the property, a service gate, locked with a simple padlock. Richard pulled out his tools, worked the lock with shaking hands. It opened. They stepped through, onto the street, into the world. Sarah stopped again, completely overwhelmed. Cars passed on the road, a woman walked a dog across the street, a mailman made his rounds. Normal life, everyday life, life that Sarah had been denied for most of her existence. She stared at it all like someone seeing colors. For the first time, Richard kept his arm around Sarah, supporting her, shielding her. She leaned into him, trusting him in a way that broke his heart and healed it at the same time. They reached his car 2 blocks away. Richard opened the passenger door, helped Sarah inside. She sat stiffly, uncertain, like she did not quite believe this was real, like she expected to wake up back in that room. He got in the driver's seat, started the engine. His hands were still shaking, the adrenaline of the past hour was catching up to him. Where are we going? Sarah asked quietly. To a hospital, to get you checked, to start the process. Richard pulled out into traffic, headed toward Manhattan, toward help, toward the beginning of justice. His phone rang. David. Richard let it go to voicemail. It rang again. He ignored it. There would be time to explain later, time to tell his son everything, but not now, not yet. Beside him, Sarah stared out the window, watching the world pass by. Trees, buildings, people, all of it strange and familiar at the same time, like a dream half remembered. I remember car rides, she said softly. When I was little, my mother used to sing. Maybe the memories will come back, maybe. They drove in silence for a while. The city grew closer, taller buildings, more traffic. The rain kept falling, washing everything clean. Thank you, Sarah said suddenly, her voice breaking, for not giving up, for finding me. Richard's throat tightened. Emotions he had been holding back, for 33 years threatened to overwhelm him completely. I never stopped looking, even when everyone said you were gone. I never stopped. I know, some part of me knew someone was still looking. Richard reached over, squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, a connection 33 years in the making. They reached the hospital, Manhattan Presbyterian. Richard had called ahead. Dr. Helen Zhao was waiting, at the emergency entrance, 50-something, kind eyes, professional demeanor. Richard parked, helped Sarah out. Dr. Zhao approached with a gentle smile. Mr. Collins? This is Sarah? Yes, she needs help. Dr. Zhao nodded, looked at Sarah with compassion, without judgment, without the cruelty Sarah had known for so long. Come with me, we will take care of you. Sarah looked at Richard, panic flashing in her eyes, fear of being separated again. I will be right here, Richard promised. I am not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Dr. Zhao led them inside, into warmth, into safety, into the beginning of healing. That would take years, maybe a lifetime. Behind them, the rain fell harder, washing the streets clean, washing away the immediate past. But some stains ran too deep, some truths demanded justice. The hospital room was quiet, sterile, white walls, white sheets, medical equipment humming softly in the corner. Sarah sat on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath her. She looked small, fragile, like someone who might disappear, if you looked away for too long. Dr. Zhao had been gentle, kind. She had taken blood samples, hair samples, cheek swabs, all the evidence needed for DNA testing. Sarah had flinched at every touch, decades of conditioning made every interaction feel like a potential threat. Richard stood by the window, watching his daughter, his found daughter. The words still felt unreal in his mind. 33 years, 33 years of searching, of hoping, of slowly dying inside, and now she was here, alive, broken but alive. His phone buzzed. Again, David had been calling for hours, leaving voicemails, sending texts, each one more urgent than the last. Richard knew he could not avoid his son forever. The time had come to explain everything. He stepped into the hallway, took a deep breath, called David back. David answered on the first ring. His voice was tight, controlled, the way he sounded when he was trying not to lose his temper. "Dad, where are you? Emily said you broke into the house, that you assaulted her, that you kidnapped Anna. What the hell is going on?" Richard closed his eyes. The lies had already started. Emily was building her defense, painting herself as the victim, painting him as the criminal. "David, I need you to listen to me, really listen. Can you do that?" "I am listening, not on the phone. I need you to come to Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, 4th floor, private wing, come alone." "Why? What happened? Are you hurt?" "I am fine, but I need you to see something, to understand something. Please, just come." There was a long pause. Richard could hear his son breathing, thinking, weighing, "I will be there in 30 minutes. The line went dead. Richard went back into the room. Sarah was staring at her hands, turning them over, looking at them like they belonged to someone else. "How are you feeling?" Richard asked softly. Sarah looked up. Her eyes were red, tired, but something else too, something new. "Hope, tiny and fragile but there. Strange, everything feels strange, like I am in a dream. It is real, I promise you it is real. I know, but knowing and feeling are different things." Richard pulled a chair close to the examination table, sat down. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but he hesitated. Physical touch was complicated for Sarah. Years of abuse had made her body a source of pain, rather than comfort. Sarah noticed his hesitation. She extended her hand, palm up, an offering. Richard took it, gently. Her hand was cold, small, the bones felt fragile beneath the skin. "David is coming," Richard said. "My son, your brother." Sarah's eyes widened. "Brother," the word seemed to shock her. "I have a brother." "You do. He was 4 when you were taken. He probably does not remember you, but he is a good man. I think you will like him." "What if he does not believe me? What if he thinks I am lying?" "The DNA results will prove everything, but more than that, I will make him understand. I will make him see." Sarah nodded slowly, but fear was written all over her face. Fear of rejection, fear of not being believed, fear of being sent back. "What if the test is wrong? What if I am not who you think I am?" Richard squeezed her hand, gentle but firm. "You are Sarah, I know it, not because of DNA, not because of evidence. I know it because I am your father, and fathers know their children, even after 33 years, even after everything." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. She did not try to hide them, did not try to stop them, just let them fall. "I do not remember how to be someone's daughter, I only know how to be Anna, how to obey, how to survive. Then we will learn together, one day at a time, one moment at a time." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, two people rebuilding a connection that had been violently severed decades ago. 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Richard stood, opened it. David stood in the hallway, 37 years old, tall, dark suit, federal prosecutor. He looked like Richard had at that age, same strong jaw, same serious eyes, but his face was tight with confusion, with anger. "Dad, what is this about?" Richard stepped aside, let David see into the room, see Sarah sitting on the examination table, her eyes wide, frightened. David's expression shifted, confusion, recognition, then shock. "Who is that? Come inside, sit down, I need to tell you something." David entered slowly, wary. He kept his distance from Sarah, kept his eyes moving between her and Richard, trying to understand what was happening. Richard closed the door, gestured to a chair. David did not sit, he stood, arms crossed, defensive. David, this is Sarah, your sister, the sister who was taken from us 33 years ago. David's face went blank, like his brain could not process the words, like they were in a foreign language. That is impossible. Sarah is dead. She has been dead for decades. No, she was not dead. She was alive, living in the Bennett house, in your wife's house, locked in a basement room, held prisoner for 33 years. The color drained from David's face. He took a step back, hit the wall, steadied himself. You cannot be serious. That is insane. Emily would never, her family would never. Richard's voice was calm, steady, but beneath it was steel. I found her there, in a locked room, with no windows, no identification, no life outside those walls. The Bennetts took her, they kept her, they made her forget who she was. David looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She stared back, silent, terrified, her whole body tense, ready to flee or freeze. This is Anna, David said slowly, Emily's housekeeper. She has mental health issues. Emily told me, she needs special care. That is what they wanted you to believe, that is the lie they built, to keep the truth hidden. David shook his head, denial written all over his face. No, no, Emily would have told me, we are married. She would not keep something like this from me. She kept it from everyone, her whole family did. They stole a child, they broke her, they made her into a servant, and they convinced themselves it was justified. David turned to Sarah, his voice was sharp, demanding, is this true? Did they keep you prisoner? Sarah flinched at his tone, shrank back. Richard moved between them, protective. Do not interrogate her, she has been through enough. I am a prosecutor, I need to hear it from her. I need to know if this is real, or if you have both lost your minds. Richard stepped aside. Let Sarah speak for herself, let her tell her story in her own words. Sarah's voice came out small, broken, but steady. They took me when I was 8, from a playground. A woman said my parents sent her. I believed her. When I woke up, I was in a room. Mrs. Bennett told me my old life was gone, that my parents did not want me, that I belonged to them now. She said if I was good, if I obeyed, I would be safe. If I was bad, they would hurt me. So I was good. For 33 years, I was good. David's face was white, his hands were shaking, he looked like he might be sick. Emily knew? She knew all this time? She grew up with it, Richard said. She grew up seeing me locked in that basement. It was normal to her, just part of the house, like furniture. Oh God, David sat down hard, put his head in his hands. Oh God. Richard knelt beside his son, put a hand on his shoulder. I know this is hard, I know it changes everything, but Sarah needs us now. She needs help, she needs family. David looked up, his eyes were wet, red. DNA. You are sure? We took samples an hour ago, results will be back in 2 days. But David, look at her, really look. David turned to Sarah, studied her face, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the way she held herself, and something clicked, some memory from when he was 4 years old, some ghost of recognition. Sarah, he whispered, my sister Sarah. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I am sorry, I do not remember you. I tried to remember, but they made me forget everything. David stood, moved toward her, slowly, carefully, like approaching something precious and breakable. Can I? He gestured toward her, asking permission. Sarah nodded. David wrapped his arms around her, gentle, careful. Sarah went stiff at first, then slowly, tentatively, she put her arms around him, hugged him back. 2 siblings reunited after a lifetime apart. Richard watched them, his children, together again, the family he thought was lost forever. Emotions overwhelmed him. He turned away, wiped his eyes, tried to compose himself. When he turned back, David was sitting beside Sarah, holding her hand. His face was set, hard, the face he wore in court, the face of a man who had made a decision. We are going to destroy them, David said quietly. Emily, her father, everyone who knew. I am recusing myself from this case, but my colleague Robert Hayes will handle it, and when he is done, They will spend the rest of their lives in prison. Richard nodded. Good, Dad, you need to know. Emily will fight this. She will use every resource, every connection. This will get ugly. Let it get ugly. I do not care. Sarah deserves justice. Sarah looked between them, her father and her brother, two men ready to fight for her, ready to burn the world down, to make things right. For the first time in 33 years, Sarah felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt safe, she felt loved, she felt like she might actually survive this. 2 days passed, 2 days of waiting, 2 days of Sarah telling her story in fragments, in pieces, each memory painful to excavate, each truth harder than the last. Richard had moved Sarah into his penthouse. She needed space, safety, distance from the nightmare she had lived for 33 years, but the apartment felt too big, too open, too much freedom after decades of confinement. Sarah slept in the smallest bedroom, the one that felt most like containment, most like safety. She kept the door open, could not bear to have it closed, could not bear the feeling of being locked in again. Richard barely slept. He sat outside her door most nights, listening, making sure she was breathing, making sure she was real, making sure this was not some cruel dream. David came every day, brought food Sarah would not eat, brought clothes that still had tags on them, brought hope that felt fragile as glass. On the third day, the DNA results arrived. Richard held the envelope in his hands, thick, official, from the lab at Manhattan Presbyterian. His hands were shaking, even though he knew, even though he had always known, the proof still mattered, the certainty still mattered. Sarah sat on the sofa, knees pulled to her chest, making herself small, a habit from years of trying to disappear. David stood by the window, silent, tense. Richard opened the envelope, pulled out the papers, read the words he had waited 33 years to see. Probability of paternity 99.9%. The paper trembled in his hands. He looked up at Sarah, tears streaming down his face. It is official. You are Sarah Collins. You are my daughter. Sarah's face crumpled. Years of doubt, years of being told she was nothing, years of being made to forget, all of it shattered by those words, by that proof. I am Sarah, she whispered, testing the name, trying it on like clothes that no longer fit. I am Sarah Collins. David moved to her, knelt beside the sofa, took her hand. You are Sarah, you are my sister, and we are going to make this right. Richard sat down. The relief was overwhelming, crushing. He had held himself together for days, for Sarah, for David, but now the proof was here, now it was real, now he could let himself feel it. He wept, openly, without shame, for the daughter he had lost, for the years stolen, for the family broken, and now piecing itself back together. Sarah watched him cry. Something in her face shifted, softened. She moved closer, put her hand on his shoulder, awkward, uncertain, but trying. Thank you, she said quietly, for not giving up, for finding me. Richard covered her hand with his, held on like she might disappear if he let go. They sat like that for a long time. 3 people, a family rebuilding from ashes. Later that afternoon, Robert Hayes arrived, 45 years old, federal prosecutor, David's colleague and friend. He carried a briefcase, wore a serious expression, had the look of someone who did not lose cases. Sarah sat across from him at the dining table, Richard on one side, David on the other, a united front, protection and support. Robert set up a recording device, pulled out legal pads, prepared to document everything. Sarah, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning, every detail you can remember. Sarah's hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap, tried to steady herself. Where do I start? Start with the day you were taken. Sarah closed her eyes. The memory was there, buried deep there. I was at a playground, in New Jersey. My mother was there. She was watching my brother. He was small, 4 years old. I went to the swings. There was a woman. She had a kind face. She said my parents sent her to pick me up, that there was an emergency. I believed her. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like she was reading from a script, disconnecting from the pain. She took me to a car. There was another woman inside, older. She gave me something to drink. It tasted sweet. like juice. I do not remember anything after that, Robert wrote quickly, his pen scratching across the paper. When did you wake up? In a room, small, no windows, there was a bed, a lamp, the older woman was there, she said her name was Mrs. Bennet, she said I was home now, that this was where I belonged. What did she tell you about your family? Sarah's voice cracked, the emotion breaking through. She said they did not want me anymore, that they were glad I was gone. She said I was bad, that I had done something wrong. She never said what, just that I was bad and I needed to earn my place. How did you earn your place? By working, by obeying, by forgetting. Robert looked up from his notes. His expression was careful, professional, but Richard saw anger there, tightly controlled but there. Tell me about the work. Sarah's hands clenched, unclenched, a nervous rhythm, cleaning, cooking, whatever they needed. At first, Mrs. Bennet did it with me, taught me, but as I got older, I did more alone. By the time I was 12, I did everything, all the housework, all the meals, and if you made a mistake, Sarah's face went blank, empty, the way people look when remembering, trauma too big to process. They punished me. How? Different ways. Sometimes Mrs. Bennet would lock me in the room, no food, no light, just darkness, sometimes for days. Sometimes she would hit me, with her hand, with a belt, whatever was close. Richard's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. David looked like he might be sick. Did anyone else hurt you? Mr. Bennet, Charles, he was worse. He did not hit me often, but when he did, it was bad. He broke my arm once, when I was 14, I dropped a plate. He said I was clumsy, worthless. He grabbed my arm and twisted until it snapped. Did you get medical care? No, Mrs. Bennet wrapped it, told me it would heal. It did, but it still hurts sometimes. Robert wrote faster, his expression darker. Tell me about Emily. Sarah's whole body tensed, fear and hatred warring on her face. She was always there, growing up with me, but we were not the same. She was family, I was property. She learned from her mother, how to treat me, how to control me. How old was Emily when you arrived? 5, just a year younger than me. At first, she was curious. She would come to my room, try to talk, but Mrs. Bennet stopped that, said it was not appropriate, that I was staff, not a friend. When did Emily start participating in the abuse? When her mother got sick, cancer? Emily was maybe 16, 17, she took over, became the one in charge of me. She was worse than her mother, meaner, more creative with punishments. What kind of punishments? Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. She would starve me, for days, then make me cook elaborate meals I could not eat. She would make me clean the same room over and over, inspect it, find faults, make me start again. She said I was disgusting, that I smelled, that no one would ever want me, that I should be grateful they kept me at all. Robert's pen stopped, he looked at Sarah, really looked at her, seeing the broken woman in front of him, understanding the depth of what had been done. Did Emily ever tell her husband? David? Sarah shook her head. No, she kept me hidden. When he came to the house, I stayed in the basement, in my room, out of sight. She said if I ever spoke to him, if I ever tried to get help, she would kill me, and I believed her. David made a sound, choked, anguished. He stood up, walked to the window, could not look at Sarah, could not face what his wife had done. Robert continued, professional, focused. Sarah, you mentioned in your initial statement, that there was someone else involved, a man named Michael Harris. Sarah nodded. Emily's boyfriend. He has been around for years, even after she married David. He helped her, helped hide me. He talked about money, about shares, about how when they got rid of Mr. Collins, they would have everything. Richard's head snapped up. Got rid of me. They had a plan. I heard them talking, in the kitchen. They thought I was in the basement, but I was cleaning upstairs. They said once they had access to the company shares through David, they would arrange an accident, make it look natural, heart attack maybe, then Emily would inherit everything through David. The room went silent, the weight of it crushing. Emily had not just kept Sarah prisoner, she had married David, as part of a larger plan, A scheme to steal everything, to destroy the Collins family from the inside. David turned from the window. His face was white, drawn. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. We need to arrest them, now, all of them. Robert nodded. I will take this to the judge, get warrants, we will move fast, before they can run, before they can destroy evidence. He looked at Sarah, his expression softer now, gentler. Sarah, you are incredibly brave. What you have survived, what you are doing now, it takes courage most people do not have. Sarah did not respond, just sat there, small and broken and trying to hold herself together. After Robert left, the three of them sat in silence, processing, grieving, preparing for what came next. Finally, Sarah spoke. What happens now? Richard moved closer, took her hand. Now we make sure they pay, all of them, for every day, every hurt, every stolen moment. We make sure they never hurt anyone again. Sarah nodded, squeezed his hand. For the first time in 33 years, justice felt possible. For the first time in 33 years, Sarah believed she might actually be free. The arrest happened at dawn. Federal agents surrounded the Bennett estate, black vehicles, flashing lights. The neighborhood woke to the sight of Charles Bennett, being led out in handcuffs. His face was red, furious. He shouted about lawyers, about rights, about persecution. Emily did not shout. She walked out calmly, head high, still playing the role of the dignified victim, still believing she could talk her way out, still thinking money and connections would save her. Michael Harris was picked up at his apartment in the city. He tried to run, made it 3 blocks before they tackled him to the ground. He screamed that he had done nothing wrong, that this was a mistake, that he was innocent. The evidence said otherwise. Robert Hayes built his case methodically, carefully, like constructing a building one brick at a time, each piece of evidence supporting the next, each witness statement reinforcing the truth. The basement rooms, photographed, documented, the locks on the outside of the doors, the bare walls, the thin mattresses, the complete absence of personal belongings, all of it screaming captivity. Medical records, Sarah's broken arm that had healed wrong, malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, scars consistent with repeated physical abuse, the body keeping score even when the mind tried to forget. Financial records, Michael Harris receiving payments from Emily Bennett, emails discussing the plan, the scheme to access Collins Enterprises through David, the conspiracy laid bare in black and white, and Sarah's testimony, detailed, devastating, impossible to refute. The trial took 6 weeks, 6 weeks of reliving the nightmare, 6 weeks of facing her abusers across a courtroom, 6 weeks of the world watching, judging, debating whether she was telling the truth. Richard attended every day, sat in the front row, behind the prosecution table, his presence a constant reminder to Sarah, that she was not alone, that someone believed her, that someone was fighting for her. David came when he could, when his schedule allowed, when he could bear to face what his wife had done. He looked hollowed out, gutted, like someone who had lost everything, and did not know how to rebuild. The defense tried everything. They claimed Sarah was mentally ill, that she had fabricated the story, that she was after money, that the Bennetts had rescued her from a troubled home, and she was now turning on them out of spite. But the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The jury saw through the lies. On the final day, the courtroom was packed, media filled the back rows, cameras lined the hallway outside. The world wanted to see justice, wanted to witness the end of this horror story. Sarah sat at the prosecution table. She wore a simple blue dress. Richard had bought it for her. She still was not comfortable in new clothes, still felt like she did not deserve nice things, but she wore it for him, for this moment. The judge entered, everyone stood, the room fell silent, heavy with anticipation. Judge Morrison was 60-something, gray hair, sharp eyes. She had a reputation for being fair but harsh, for showing no mercy to those who preyed on the vulnerable. She looked at the defendants, Emily, Charles, Michael. All three sat stone-faced, refusing to show remorse, refusing to acknowledge what they had done. The judge's voice was cold, clear. Will the defendants please rise? They stood. Emily's lawyer touched her arm, whispered something. She ignored him. kept her eyes forward, defiant to the end. The jury has reached a verdict. Before I read it, I want to say something. In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen terrible things, crimes that shake your faith in humanity, but what was done to Sarah Collins goes beyond crime. It was systematic destruction of a human soul. It was evil in its purest form. The courtroom was silent, every eye on the judge. The jury finds Emily Bennett guilty, on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit murder, assault. The sentence is 10 years in federal prison. Emily's face went white, her knees buckled slightly, her lawyer caught her arm, held her up. The jury finds Michael Harris guilty, on all counts of conspiracy and accessory to kidnapping. The sentence is 8 years in federal prison. Michael's head dropped, his shoulders shook, whether from fear or regret, no one could tell. The jury finds Charles Bennett guilty, of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and assault. The sentence is 6 years in federal prison. Charles's face turned purple, he started to speak, to protest. The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Bennett, you will be silent." He closed his mouth, but rage burned in his eyes. The judge continued, her voice softer now, directed at Sarah. "Miss Collins, I cannot give you back the years that were stolen. I cannot undo the harm that was done, but I can promise you this: these people will pay for what they did. They will lose their freedom, their reputation, their ability to hurt anyone else, and perhaps, in time, you will find peace." Sarah's eyes were wet, tears streaming down her face, but she was not crying from sadness. She was crying from relief, from vindication, from the weight of 33 years finally lifting. Richard reached forward from his seat, put his hand on her shoulder. She covered it with hers, held on tight. The judge banged her gavel one final time. "This court is adjourned." The courtroom erupted, media rushed for the doors, cameras flashed, voices shouted questions, but Sarah did not hear any of it. She just sat there, breathing, existing, free. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was massive: reporters, supporters, people who had followed the trial, and wanted to show solidarity. They held signs, called Sarah's name, told her she was brave. Federal marshals escorted them through a side entrance, away from the chaos, into a waiting car. Richard sat beside Sarah in the back seat, David in the front. None of them spoke. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people who had survived something terrible together. As they drove through the city, Sarah stared out the window, watching the world pass by, a world she was finally part of again, a world that was no longer her prison. "What are you thinking?" Richard asked quietly. Sarah did not answer right away, just kept looking out the window. "I am thinking about all the days I lost, all the moments I will never get back, and I am angry, so angry, but I am also thinking about today, about the judge's words, about them going to prison, and I feel something I have not felt in a long time." "What is that?" "Hope, real hope, not the kind you cling to just to survive, but the kind that makes you believe things might actually get better." Richard squeezed her hand. "Things will get better, I promise you that." They drove to a small Italian restaurant, one Richard had reserved the entire place for the afternoon. Privacy, safety, space to breathe without cameras and questions. David ordered wine. Sarah had never tasted wine. She sipped it carefully, made a face. It was bitter, strange, but she smiled anyway, because this was what normal people did. This was what freedom looked like. They ate slowly, talked about small things, the food, the weather, anything but the trial, anything but the past. For a few hours, they were just a family having dinner, but eventually, the conversation turned serious. David set down his fork, looked at Sarah. "I am sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for not knowing, for not seeing, for bringing her into our family." Sarah shook her head. "You did not know. She hid it well. She hid me well. I should have known. I am a prosecutor. I am trained to see things, to question, and I missed it completely. She fooled everyone. That is what predators do." David's eyes were wet. He wiped them roughly, angry at himself, angry at his blindness. "I filed for divorce yesterday, annulment actually. The marriage was based on fraud, on lies. It never should have existed. Sarah nodded. She did not know what to say, did not know how to comfort him. She was still learning how to be a sister, how to be part of a family. Richard spoke instead, his voice gentle but firm. None of this is your fault, David. You were a victim too. Emily used you, manipulated you, but that is over now. We move forward, together. David nodded, but the guilt was still written all over his face. It would take time, maybe years, maybe forever, but they would face it together. As the sun set, they left the restaurant, drove back to Richard's penthouse. Sarah was exhausted, the trial had drained her, the testimony had reopened wounds that were still raw, but as she lay in bed, that night, door open, Richard nearby, she felt something shift inside her. For 33 years, she had been Anna, the prisoner, the servant, the broken thing locked in a basement, but Anna was gone now, buried with the lies. She was Sarah Collins, she was 41 years old, she was someone's daughter, someone's sister, she was free, and tomorrow, she would wake up, and start learning how to live. 6 months had passed since the trial, 6 months of learning how to exist in the world, 6 months of discovering what normal felt like. Richard had retired from Collins Enterprises. At 70 years old, he passed control to David and trusted advisors. Now he focused on what mattered most, Sarah. Every morning, Richard woke early, made coffee, 2 cups, one for him, one for Sarah. Some mornings she came out right away, other mornings it took longer. The nightmares still came, but she was trying. That was what mattered. This morning, Sarah appeared at 7, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a sweater, clothes she had picked out herself. That small act of choice still felt like a miracle. "Good morning," Richard said. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, smiled. "Good morning." They sat together on the sofa, looking out at the city. The skyline stretched before them. "What do you want to do today?" It was a question he asked every morning. At first, Sarah had not known how to answer, but slowly, she was learning. "I want to go to the movies, a real movie theater, with popcorn." Richard smiled. "Then that is what we will do." They spent the morning slowly. Sarah was still learning that time did not have to be filled with work, that rest was not punishment, that doing nothing at all was allowed. At noon, they ate lunch. Richard had hired a chef, who came 3 times a week to teach Sarah about food, about flavors, about enjoyment instead of survival. Today was pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil. Sarah ate slowly, savoring each bite. She had gained weight over 6 months, her face had filled out, the hollow look had faded, she looked healthier, alive. After lunch, they walked to the movie theater 4 blocks away. Sarah still was not comfortable in crowds, still felt anxious in open spaces, but she was trying, pushing herself a little more each day. The theater was old, classic, red velvet seats, ornate ceiling decorations. Sarah stood in the lobby, and stared up at the chandelier. Light sparkled through crystal, casting rainbows on the walls. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Richard bought tickets, popcorn, candy, soda, all the things Sarah had never experienced, all the normal joys of going to the movies. They sat in the middle of the theater, the lights dimmed. Sarah sat forward, eyes wide, taking it all in, the giant screen, the surround sound, the way the whole room transformed into another world. The movie was a comedy, something light, something that would not trigger bad memories. Sarah laughed, actually laughed. The sound startled Richard. It was rare, precious. When the movie ended, they walked out into the afternoon sun. Sarah was still smiling, still glowing. "Can we do that again?" "Anytime you want." They stopped at a small restaurant for dinner, Italian, Sarah's favorite. She was still discovering what she liked, building a sense of self that had been stripped away. The waiter brought bread. Sarah tore off a piece, dipped it in olive oil. She had learned to appreciate food, to enjoy it. "Dad," she said, the word still felt strange, but she was using it more. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you ever think about Mom?" Richard set down his fork. They did not talk about Claire often, the topic was too painful. "I think about her every day, about what she went through, the guilt she carried." "Do you know where she is?" "California." We have not spoken in over 20 years. Sarah nodded slowly, processing. Do you think she would want to see me? Richard reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. I think she would want nothing more, but that is your decision. When you are ready, we will find her together. Sarah squeezed his hand, grateful. They finished dinner, walked home through the city streets. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Sarah stopped, looked up, let the colors wash over her. I used to dream about sunsets, she said quietly. In that room, I would try to remember what they looked like, but I could never quite picture it. Richard stood beside her, silent. But this is better than I remembered, better than I imagined. They stood there until the sun disappeared, until the streetlights came on. The next morning, David came for breakfast. He came often now, trying to rebuild his relationship with his sister. He brought pastries from a bakery Sarah liked, croissants, danishes, sweet and normal. They sat around the dining table, the three of them, a family learning how to be a family. I have news, David said. He looked nervous, excited. I have been seeing someone. Her name is Rachel. She is a teacher. Sarah smiled. That is good. You deserve to be happy. I want you to meet her. Just dinner sometime, the four of us. Sarah nodded. I would like that. Richard watched them, his children, building a future, moving forward. After breakfast, David left for work. Richard and Sarah spent the afternoon at Central Park, walking the paths, watching people, dogs, children playing. Sarah was still learning how to be around people, how to trust, but she was trying. They sat on a bench near the lake, watched ducks glide across the water. I want to do something meaningful, Sarah said suddenly. I want to help people. Richard looked at her. What do you mean? People like me, people who have been through trauma. I want to volunteer. I do not know exactly what, but I want my life to have purpose. Richard felt his chest swell with pride. 6 months ago, Sarah had been broken, and now she was thinking about helping others. We will figure it out together, whatever you want to do. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust, of love. They sat like that for a long time, father and daughter, reunited after 33 years, making up for lost time. A week later, they took a trip. Richard rented a car, drove north into the Catskill Mountains. The landscape changed, became greener, quieter, more peaceful. They arrived at a small cemetery, old, well-maintained, headstones dotting the hillside under tall trees. Richard led Sarah to 2 graves, side by side, simple gray markers. Margaret Collins, died 1995, Thomas Collins, died 2001. Sarah stood before the graves, silent. These were her grandparents, people who would have loved her, if they had lived long enough to see her return. Richard knelt down, placed white roses on each grave. Mom, Dad, I brought someone to meet you. This is Sarah, your granddaughter. She came home. His voice broke, tears fell, all the grief he had carried for decades pouring out. Sarah knelt beside him, put her hand on his back, comfort flowing between them. I wish I could have known them. They would have loved you. They never stopped hoping you would come back. They stayed at the cemetery for an hour, talking to the dead, sharing stories, building connections across time and loss. When they finally left, Sarah felt lighter, more connected, more part of something bigger. On the drive back, Sarah looked out the window, watched the mountains give way to highways, the highways give way to buildings, the buildings grow taller until they became the skyline she now called home. Dad, thank you, for what? For everything, for not giving up, for finding me, for giving me a life, a real life. Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel, emotions overwhelming him. You do not have to thank me, you are my daughter. I would have searched forever, I know, but I am thankful anyway. They drove in comfortable silence, the city lights appearing in the distance, home waiting for them. That night, Sarah lay in bed, door open, Richard reading in the living room, the apartment quiet but not empty, safe but not confining. She thought about the past 6 months, the therapy sessions, the nightmares becoming less frequent, the small victories, the tiny moments of joy. She thought about the future, the possibilities, the chance to help others, to build a life that mattered. She thought about her family, Richard who never gave up, David who was learning to be a brother, Rachel who might become a friend. For 33 years, Sarah had been a prisoner, a ghost, a broken thing locked away from the world, but she was not that anymore. She was Sarah Collins, 41 years old, survivor, daughter, sister. She was free, and tomorrow, she would wake up, and keep learning how to live, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one breath at a time, until living became natural again, until freedom felt like home. What would you do if someone you loved returned, after decades of being lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words might comfort someone who needs it, and if this story touched you, please share it with friends or family. You never know who might need a little hope today. Thank you for being part of our journey today. This has been Story Theater.